Welcome to the market recap presented by Tackle Trading. Get in the game.
Good afternoon, Tackle Traders, and hello, YouTube. This is Frank coming to you with the market recap. It's Friday. It felt like Friday yesterday. It is Friday today. It is August 16th. Stocks gapping up on the open, taking a little bit of a bullish run early part of the trading day, and then the second half, I mean, it was nothing. Let's just get this one over with. Welcome out, David. Welcome out, everybody. Hey there, Lauren. Yeah, I'm not unhappy to have it be Friday. It felt, Ryan said it yesterday, and he hit it right on the head. Yesterday's trading felt like a Friday, and so did today's. So 2 Fridays in a row. So welcome out, everybody. Hope the market treated you right here today as another pretty crazy week comes to an end. Volatility still high as we kind of work through things in the market. Some interesting names, particularly in the retail space, coming out with earnings next week. We've got Home Depot, we've got Lowe's, TJX, the Target, Ross, our old friends, the L Brands, the Gap, Kohl's. So a lot of retail type stores or companies coming out with earnings here next week. Just like 25 or so S&P companies reporting. So not a huge number of earnings to worry about, but certainly it'll be retail. We'll be interested in seeing how that impacts the retail. If Macy's is any idea of what to expect, it's not good. Macy's, of course, gapped down big on their earnings report. As you look at the S&P, we gapped early, running right into that old swing low on the 15-minute chart, pushed through it with relative ease, had a real nice surge as that resistance level gave out, and then nothing. A little bit of back, a little bit of forth, really tight trading range to finish the second half, and actually a little bit more than that of the trading day. And welcome out, Adib. Great to see you, sir, as always. Hope all is well. As we're going into next week, and have a few different levels of resistance I believe to be keeping an eye on. First and foremost is going to be our trend line that we've established here on the shorter term, which is 29s. I think we have to respect because it's a big number. So psychologically, I think 29 is kind of the first level of resistance. And hi, Patricia, welcome out. Hope you're doing well. Second level and more important technically than 29. Maybe 29 is more important psychologically, I think we could say, but technically I think this trend, we've got to get back above these highs before we can start getting too crazy from a bullish point of view. We really do kind of find ourselves in a trading range. So many lines that I'm going to have to clean some off. Welcome out, Scott. Great to see you. We've got to take out this 2940 resistance zone before, in my opinion, we're getting any clarity on the upside. Very similarly, I think we have to take out our support zone, and I still have it at 28 with just the everything there, the 200 daily, the 50 weekly, our swing lows just north above it, big round number. I think we got to kind of put ourselves in this trading range between approximately 28 and 2940. I still skew to the bearish side personally, but I don't think, I'm not super bearish, broadly speaking, at least until we give out at that 28. So we're just going to be back, into a stock pickers type of a market. Probably should expect a little bit more volatility here next week. If we kind of scrunch this down into a shorter time frame, and not particularly short, I'm just going to come into the 4-hour time frame here on the S&P. We've had our breakdown, we've had our retracement, right? We've had that retracement trigger, and people start to go to the short side. As of right now, we've not broke support, but we've not broke that resistance. If we do hold this, it's going to look a little bit like a W type of a pattern. That's why I think it's so important before we get any real clarity to get back above that 2940 range on the S&P 500. So it'll be another one of those weeks as we work into next week. At least in my opinion, that's how I'll be kind of treating it. Other markets are going to find themselves in very similar patterns. Dow Jones working back. We do have to contend with these falling 9 EMAs as well. As many of us know, they can oftentimes, not always, I wish always, but oftentimes can act as resistance catalysts. So certainly something worth keeping an eye on would be 26 on the Dow here. That's going to be putting us right into that. But again, much like the S&P 500, got to break some resistance. Until we're breaking resistance, I don't think we can be quote unquote bullish. We can trade bullish, right? We'll have some bulls and some bears regardless, but I don't think for me, I'm not going to be a bull until we break some resistance. Same thing, but we are holding up a little bit better on the NASDAQ. And I think that's very easy to see when we look at it on a weekly time frame. If we just think about this as a chart and forget about everything else, we've had a nice run, nice pullback, nice run, nice pullback. We haven't broke support, right? We tried to push up, not a great closing candle on the weekly to inspire us, but it has shown some upward movement off of that swing low from last week. So the NASDAQ's actually looking like it's still maybe potentially in an upward trend as we look at it on the weekly. Now, I believe we got to kind of get back above all of the goodies that we have at that 7,700 mark, or the 50, the 20, the resistance level. Right now, we've actually put in a higher low, so it'll be interesting to see where this one takes us. Broadly speaking, that's going to be the first bite, the bull signal or the next bull signal, if you will. I think you could make an argument, especially if we see any more upward movement early next week, that taking out this low from this week would be a bear signal. So we'll probably need a little movement before I'm too convinced of that. Might need to break the lows on Monday if we see some downward movement, but I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes at least a little bit of a short-term support zone. And welcome out, Jasari and Fortino. Always great to see you guys. A lot of challenges, but we closed pretty nicely. We did close, the week out pretty nicely. Over on the rut makes me, it's days like this, and again, we're always perfect in hindsight, right? Or you're always dumb in hindsight, both, right? I think is how it works. Firing back very nicely over on the rut off of this support zone. Buyers brave enough, much braver than me, coming in off of that support zone, certainly rewarded here today. Very nice day over on the rut, up over 2% off of that support level. I don't think we really need this anymore, so I'm just going to get rid of it. That was some old stuff. We've already violated that. So our resistance level is going to be, way up here at 1530. So we've got a little bit of room. We have to deal with that falling 9. Certainly worth keeping an eye on, as we've kind of talked before. I think today is more evidence of the importance of this support level on the rut. Personally, if this thing does give out, I do expect downward movement. And while I don't know the future, I can't figure out for the life of me why anyone would buy it until 14. And so, there's quite a bit of room between the break of that support and at least what I would consider a tempting technical catalyst. So that gives out, I do think we should expect bearish movement on the rut. Not a lot of things that at least jumping out that says, yeah, you can trust this. 14 does have our 200 weekly, which can be a support catalyst. If that gives out, boy, there's a lot of room to the downside, but that's a lot of ifs. Right now, for another day, support wins over on the Russell. So that is where we find ourselves as we kind of work through the indexes. Nice upward movement off of the materials ETF here today. Makes sense. This is one of the areas that does make sense. I don't trust a lot in this market. I'm very cautious about it, but this does seem to be a sensible thing. We've seen all the history at 56 together. We know this where our trend line is. Now we're kind of in this weird spot where we've shown some upward movement off of a tempting or a real technical catalyst, trend line 56 support zone. Now we've smacked right into that 9 EMA, maybe a little bit of a battle. Once we kind of need to start winning some little fights, right? Breaking above the 9s, kind of step 1, breaking, holding at step 2, breaking above the 20, having the 9 flip around and stop moving down, start moving up. I look at this as overall an interesting opportunity in the materials. I do believe that it's going to go with the market. If particularly speaking, if the market's really selling, I don't think anything is 100% immune. Certainly not the material sector. Maybe a little more over in the defensive sectors. But I think we're in an interesting spot overall. It's very mixed though when you look at the individual components. We've looked a lot at them, and we can look at them again. On one hand, you've got a Lin, which is in my opinion a very legitimate breakdown candidate below this little support level that we put in, maybe even a bearish retracement, although we're too close to a support zone for me to probably feel comfortable with that. But you've also got SHW, who's just been such a juggernaut, hitting a new high today. You've got APD that I know I've been watching for a break. I'll be watching next week too, until I have a reason not to. So really is going to continue to be mixed. Interesting opportunities in my mind on both sides in the materials coming off of that support. Now, if we break this trend line, that we break this support, I don't know what we'll call it. I think conservatively we'll call it the swing low from this week. I think that's probably the safest thing to call it. We'll kind of follow it together. If that gives out, then we probably should expect some more selling, and there's really not a lot of support. Some at 54, our pivot really at 53. So if we do give out, if we see selling come back into the market and it impacts the material sector, there is room to the downside there as well. But right now we're holding that trend. So that's where we'll find ourselves going into early next week. A little bit of a bounce back day. It felt, we talked a little bit about yesterday, it just kind of felt like energy was ready for a retracement. Market going up here today certainly made that easy for it to do. Still very bearish in my opinion. Watch as it works into that 9. That 9 will kind of be that first level of resistance. Any clear signals on a retracement, I think, will be very interesting. We're just going to have to, and this is going to be true for a lot of bearish retracements going into early next week. We're going to need a little development at the beginning of the week, right? We're going to need a little upward movement, a turnaround candle, break of intraday trend. So hard to see a lot of great bearish retracement opportunities on Monday morning. They certainly can develop a little bit into the middle of the week. Just going to need a little bit of development. Certainly going to need that on the energy sector as well. Over in the financials, it's the banks, right? We talk a lot about that. At least for the ETF, it is the banks. They're in an interesting spot. Holding on the 26 support zone over on the financial ETF makes a lot of sense. I mean, we've got, if we want to bet on support, if we're support bouncer traders, and I'm more of a breakout type of a trader, but I know there's a lot of support bounce traders out there. We've got a level of support on JP Morgan, right? A little bit of upward momentum. You could make a case that, lately we're pretty sideways, right? If wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world if a month and a half down the road, we're back at resistance again. Betting on support could make some sense. On the other side of it, which is probably more where I will be looking, is, hey, I wish all of you the best who are doing that. If we break below these support levels, pretty good sell signal. So that's probably the perspective I'll be coming out with it. But JP Morgan, upward movement, Bank of America, Citigroup, USB. So a lot of just kind of hanging right, at support. Did see some nice movement off of the banks today, though. USB kind of in an interesting spot, breaking trend, pulling back and now working into that trend line. I'm interested in seeing if we see some slowing momentum as we approach that trend line, that 9 EMA. That might be an interesting retracement type of candidate, in my opinion. Again, going to need a little bit of work. On the other side of things, so it really is the banks. Got to be careful with the banks, really wherever you're at. They've got a lot of support, so if I'm a bear, I have to respect that support. They've got a lot of negative momentum. If I'm a buyer, I can trust support, but I probably better not go crazy, right? I probably never should go crazy by any means. You are seeing a little bit of mixture in some of the in the insurance types as well. I've seen plenty of these type of patterns develop. I'm just going to still that here. But basically, we're kind of creating these higher lows, but we've kind of established this lower high. Little bit of a triangle type of pattern developing on something like Allstate, but you have, Travelers. Welcome out, Amy. Good to see you. Whoops, that's not Travelers. That's a TiVo Group. Travelers, there we go. Kind of still doing that dance at support. Still think would make for an interesting breakdown candidate. Still in downward trend, although if we can spend a little time in here, I think we could start to make a case for a K trade break either way, much like the market's kind of in that spot for a clear signal, at least. Got a clear level of support, clear level of resistance. One of them will give out eventually, right? And that should be a decent signal. So a little bit of a mixed bag over there. We'll take a look at some of these other things, but over on Chubb Limited, I know we've talked a lot about them. I think they're in the reports a couple of weeks ago. Nice little pullback opportunity, confirmation candle here today. So as usual, It's the banks. And so when you're talking about the financial ETF, they have a very, very, a very heavily weighted into that. Still think we have to be careful with the location, and they certainly can be impacted by all of the rate stuff. So do need to be careful there. Still some interesting things out there. Both bulls and bears skewed just a little bit to the bearish side myself. Yeah, I could see why you'd say that. It seemed like it was just one of those. We saw some upward movement, Brandon, and yesterday, and kind of held it, and it seemed like a great day to close some shorts, and then the market gaps on the open, and well, that give me all the excuse I need. And then, it seemed like it was not a lot of trust that this is a great, turnaround day. Maybe it is, but it doesn't seem like this was a real, yeah, this is some real excited buyers. Maybe it was. I won't be convinced till they break support, though, or break resistance, though. They're going to have to do a little bit more than that for me. Over in industrials, looked at them yesterday. Hanging at this support level, saw some upward movement, saw some weird price action on John Deere post earnings. Ended up having a pretty solid day coming off of those lows. It started to look like it wasn't going to be all that great when they first reported, but actually turned around before the market opened. Of course, a lot of work to do over there. We've got plenty of things kind of sitting on support, just like or hanging around that support level, just like the ETF is. Many examples. UTX here. FedEx, another one kind of sitting right there at that support level. Very key zone of support in my mind for the industrial sector right now. Still like where we are on the defense industry, but not great trade setups if I'm not already there, at least in my opinion right now, whether it's Lockheed or NOC or level 3. They've kind of already shown some upward movement. Probably have to put them into more breakout type of plays. And I'm not sure what you ran into there, Emily. And so I don't exactly know. I wish I was more helpful on that side, but I'm not sure what exactly you ran into there. I might hop over into the clubhouse, Emily, and we'll see. We can get a little bit clearer on that. Hopefully get a little bit of clarity for you there. So over on in the industrials, and welcome out, of course. Great to have you with us. We are moving upward off support again. Falling 9, first level of resistance. Need to break back above that resistance or that 9 before we, that's kind of the first signal, right? Before we can really do anything. Again, that's just the first signal. Most things are still below that 9 EMA, and that can be a little bit of a catalyst there. So keep an eye. And I don't know if we should call it the swing low down here or the low from yesterday. I think that will probably depend on us. As we look at it and kind of think about the prices, it's probably only a couple of pennies to make sure we're taking out the swing low. So probably err on the safe side. That breaking down, that would look a lot like that looks like a big old potential M, right? Support still held. And so if we see some upward movement off of support, that would make sense. Do have to respect that 76 level of resistance if we can take out that 9 EMA. This is a key support zone in my mind. Over in technology, a little bit of a bounce back day. I do believe that this is kind of lining up for an interesting break. Again, this might, in this market, it's hard to say much of anything, but it might take a little bit of time to break back above that top. If the bulls do come back into play, would be a very nice signal. If we can take out that resistance zone just shy of 80, there's really no major levels of resistance, at least in my mind, until we get to 82.50, that high point. So I'll be a little bit patient there. Right, as of right now, we've kind of made this higher low. Below 76, kind of on the other side, we have some room to the downside. If that 76 does give out, 72 seems very likely. There's just not a lot of price action history. Of course, technology can move quickly both ways, whether it's breaking up or breaking down. So neutral until we come out of this range. A little bit of positivity, one of the few areas able to close above that 9 EMA here today. That's just one little thing, but it is a thing. It is a thing, and I'll recognize it as such. Moving into the staples, pushing through that resistance, really good follow through. Again, these are kind of continuation in a lot of ways, and many of the companies, the bullish companies within this sector, not a lot of great pullbacks and things like that. You did have KMB break out here today, closing above that resistance level. So as we kind of work into, there's going to be some breakout type of candidates out there. Don't really have a lot of resistance until we work up to the high point. We are kind of continuing to move off of that trend. If we zoom this into a weekly really quick, just looks like a nice hammer candle pullback with a nice confirmation weekly candlestick, right? So upward movement next week. I will expect to see to make a legitimate run at resistance. That would be my expectations. Really, we'll remain bullish as long as we hold this swing low. I'm going to keep it at 57. We've got an old breakout point there. Our swing low is just above that. That would be kind of the clear sell signal. Could make a bearish argument though, and I guess maybe I should rewind that a little bit. Tradable bearish signal. I think you could make a case with the way we've seen things move, that if we take out this week's low, that wouldn't be hard to work our way back to that more longer term level of support. So certainly a price worth keeping an eye on there in the form of about 58.60, but most importantly, the low from this week. Don't expect to run into that, but doesn't mean it won't happen, right? So over in utilities, closing above, I believe we can say that this closed above resistance. That might be a little bit of eye of the beholder thing, but it did enough to convince me that we closed above it. Upward movement next week. Really, really like what we're seeing over in the utilities. There's plenty of things to go. We looked at Southern Company yesterday, still kind of sitting in that bullish retracement type of area. There's plenty of them out there. XEC, I've been all day long, I've been putting in the I knew I was going to do it all day long. I've been doing that. Every time I want to look at XEL, I've been typing XEC. XEL still knocking on the door break. Did breach on the intraday. Wasn't able to close above that, but very much knocking on the door. I would expect that with the utility, if the utilities can follow through on that break, these guys shouldn't be too terribly far behind them. So utilities, in a market like this, I like them anyway. I do like a close above resistance. You guys know me. I always like follow through, always something I want to see, but a good start, have to break it first. And the first time we broke resistance in a long time, right, on the utility sector. Bounce back day, but middle of the range. I mean, boy, you want to talk middle of the range. I mean, we are smack dab in the middle between resistance and support. I still think overall we skew to the bull side, to the bear side broadly, but interestingly enough, the trade setups I'm finding in healthcare are more skewed to the bull side. EW still here knocking on the door again, much like XLU, breaking resistance on the intraday, taking out today's high on early next week. It might be something I would call confirmation at least. Interesting things on both sides. We talked a lot about J&J. I know Cody's keeping a close eye on these guys. I'm sure he's not the only one. Hey, trade style, right? Break support, break resistance, still in the middle, need some time to develop. Very much like the sector as a whole. Do think we have to maintain a little bit of caution with healthcare just because of where it is. If we can break this resistance, great. We've got a pretty good signal. If we can break support, great. We've got a pretty good signal. I think we're leaning with the trend. That's why I think we skew a little bit to the bearish side in healthcare. But it's been kind of acting weird. And it's really a mixed bag. You look at some things and you're like, ugh. Other things you're like, yeah, that's pretty nice. And that's really kind of where we find ourselves in healthcare right now. Bouncing off the support on XLY, as we saw at the beginning, lots of companies within this space with earnings next week certainly could have a little something to do with how this ends up looking by the end of next week, particularly the retail companies. XRT, another one that we looked at yesterday, the retail ETF, definitely worth keeping an eye on, testing a long-term support level. I just want to look at this chart one more time because it's so pretty. Very clear level of support. Hasn't broke yet. Maybe it never will. But we'll see. A lot of interesting names in retail coming out with earnings next week. On the sector overall, again, pretty important level of support. If that gives out, while we do have the 200 that may, and I think we should respect it, I don't think we should expect it to act as a level of support. I would expect if we take out support, 110 is likely. If we do hold support, again, we've got a ways to go. We're making lower highs and lower lows. For me, until I get that flipped around, got to be skewed to the bearish side. At support, though, does make sense. Buyers willing to take a stab here at this support zone. Over in the REITs, breaking out as well. Kind of hard to tell. Well, there we go. Can see it all right. A nice close above resistance. Look at it on the weekly perspective. Looks even prettier. Coming way off of the weekly 9, closing pretty darn strong. You guys know the drill with me and REITs, and pretty much most of you here at Tackle Trading as well. Been big fans of the REITs. Think we continue to be big fans of the REITs. again, following through would be a great signal for carry through, but really at this point in time, I can't see a bearish argument. Broadly speaking, there are a few bearish REITs out there. I'm not interested in them from that perspective, but broadly, I think we've got to like where we are with the REITs. And over in the communication services, much like the market, coming off of the lows, still below the 9 EMA, way below resistance. Very, very unimpressive in my mind right now over in this space. Developing a little range on Facebook. So maybe if we can establish a floor, break to the downside, maybe if we can kind of trend, break some resistance, give us a signal to the upside, was able to hold support. So you have to give it a little bit of credit there. Over on Google, I think this is kind of developing interesting. Again, we've got a little clear top here. We still are kind of chopping between, but as long as we're holding this trend, a break above that resistance could be interesting. That's probably a little bit further down the road. Ryan brought up Take Two yesterday, just a little bit of upward movement. I think some traders might call that a confirmation candle. Certainly a strong trend over in Take Two. You also had our old friends AT&T break early, push right into where, I don't know about you guys or if anyone was trading them, but knocking on the door of where I thought the stop loss should be located, and breaking back above here today. So interesting week, breakout, pull back, knocking on the door, and then another breakout, breaking through the high once again. So there are some interesting things over there. Of course, Disney, one of the big names, not weighted wise. Well, they're pretty big weighted wise, but certainly a big name within this space. Testing a support zone. I'm just going to steal you, sir. Thank you very much. Got a little bit of a support zone, still some negative momentum. I know a lot of people like Disney from a fundamental perspective. Probably need to see a little bit of something before we get there. We'll keep an eye on this support zone as we're moving into next week. Got to be careful overall. As usual, though, it's basically, I think you treat everything, individually. Certainly, I think that over in XLC. So that's where we find ourselves going into next week. A little bit of skew to the bearish side, holding support in a lot of places, though. So there are some bullish arguments out there. Things are holding some support. Now that support gives out, all bets are off, right? And we do have that negative slope to the downside. So we have that pressure still being pushed. We're still in a very, in my opinion, we are still in a very volatile market, and we need to continue to act accordingly. It's not the nice mellow market of June and July. One of these days it will be, but I don't think Monday is the day to expect that to happen. Kind of a day off over in our metals, just kind of hanging, pushing to the upside, still above the 9. Over in silver, still above the 9. Over in gold, so still overall bullish. Maybe not great new swing trading entries as of early next week, but still, above the 9, showing a lot of momentum. With a little bit of selling here today, but got to do a little bit more than sell above the 9 to get me to turn on you. Over in natural gas, just a weird close to the week. I want to look at the weekly though. We were able to push into the 9 weekly, but not able to close above that 9 weekly. I do think we are a little less bearish on natural gas as of right now than we have been, but in my opinion, it has not done enough to want to get boomeranging. Now that's just me. Maybe some other people feel a little bit differently. We have kind of taken out this old breakdown point, so we can give it some credit there. Maybe if we close back, if we can push back above that 50, that would maybe be something there. I don't know what I'll need to see. I think what I'll need to see, honestly, is it to pull back, get some sellers in, create a higher low, and then break that 50. If we get that off of the low, that historic $2 range, that's something really interesting, but that is at the very least several days away, over there. And lastly, over in crude, a little bit of a back and forth day. Still believe that we kind of have to zoom in on crude to get some good ideas as far as where we want to, how we want to be looking at it. I do believe if we take out that, that support zone, it's around 53.70. We've got these lows from this week. We've also got the history back there. I think probably best to be safe. Believe that's a pretty decent sell signal. On the other end, especially the longer it goes, if we break to the upside here, and right now I think we'd have to call that probably the actual high point. If we do trend within this range, first couple of days next week, probably be closer to 55.60. A break to the upside, we could talk a little bit about it if that's the way that it goes. I still think it's more likely to break to the downside personally, but that doesn't mean I'm right, and it doesn't mean I will. Still, overall, believe that this is better from a cash flow perspective than swing trading directionally perspective right now. But if we can hang out in this little range, get a break, well, maybe we'll feel a little bit different. So that's where we find ourselves. Brendan brings up low here. So yeah, it was. Now that's an interesting one. They got earnings here next week to boot. Otherwise, pretty clean support level there, trying to move. But we have earnings next week, so as a directionally speaking, not anything I am interested in. I'm way too wimpy for that. As we take a peek ahead to next week, I found around 40 things that were worth keeping an eye on, some of which I like more than others. But you do have things like AEM here, a little bit of a pullback over in the gold, gold mining company, a little bit of a pullback developing. We looked at APD, of course, still as long as we're holding support, I'm interested in a break, however long it takes. I don't care if we trade in this 220 to this 220 to 231, 232 range for 3 months. If we trade within this range and break to the upside, I am always going to be interested. Baker Hughes, a GE company here, testing a little bit of a long-term support level. So a little bit of a breakdown candidate as we kind of look at this, maybe a little bit of a reverse cup and handle type of a pattern. Hasn't broke through support yet, maybe never will, but hanging out at support. Deep pullback over on CF, kind of like the material sector in some ways. We had that deeper pullback into that longer term trend line, also 50-day moving average. These are always interesting ones because you've got a good bounce catalyst in the 50 and the trend line, but you've got the falling moving averages. In my case, the 9, the 20. I always prefer when we run up, pull back, and then run up again. That's kind of what I'll be looking for on those deeper pullbacks. But I did think it was worth keeping an eye on from that perspective. I just wanted to follow these guys, and they really took off, as the day went on. When I put them into my list, I went through the material sector pretty early this morning, really took off. Wish I would have done more than put them on the list. Probably not something there that I'd be interested in doing anything with. Some of the energy stocks we talked about as a whole, we're going to need some development, at least in my opinion. So on Monday, not going to be a whole lot of bearish retracement, triggering, for me in the energy sector. This type of a pattern will be kind of the thing I'll be looking for early in the week. Now, if we get that nice retracement and then the doji and the downward candle on Thursday, well, I'd like to see that probably more. But in the meantime, I remain bearish on energy. So where we've established some upward trends and created these higher lows, but have yet to create higher highs, breaking this trend line will kind of be that first, sell signal over there for me, at least in the energy sector. We'll take a peek. We'll absolutely take a peek at the home builders here in just a second here, Brendan. FMC just kind of coming off of this old support zone, a little bit of an ugly pullback. I don't know why I put that one in there. In hindsight, I don't really like the way that it looks. Lynn, I really think we're in an interesting place. Really like Lynn, but I don't really care if we get some clear signals. We're at an old breakout point. We've established a low. We get a lot of pressure, break to the downside, selling pressure in the market, not a lot of support. I think that's an interesting candidate if we do see quite a bit of selling. Another bearish breakdown type of candidate as well in Suncor. ADP, really interesting, kind of hanging right out of that 200-day moving average. Not really any support beyond that, just hanging out, and that's a pretty respectable level. And beyond the 200, we've actually bounced a few times now, right? So we've got a pretty good idea that 2730 range wants to hold for us in KDP. It very well may, but there's a big empty space if it gives out. It's another interesting candidate there. A little bit of a breakout type of candidate, maybe a little more development in order on NWL here, but if we can kind of hang out within this range, again, a nice spot. I'm kind of looking for short spots if I break, there's not a lot of resistance. It's not too far away, so we can kind of be fast in this market. Kind of what I'm looking for. Tyson, we've talked a lot about Tyson already breaking out, going into a little bit of consolidation. One of those that's I want to make sure that I don't ever try to forget, but probably need some development between now and when a trading opportunity presents itself. A little bit of a double bottom type of formation here on tap as well. Nice nice move here on American Homes for Rent, little higher low, taking out some resistance went over in the REITs here. We looked at CB, we looked at AFLAC here potentially. I kind of like, I kind of lean towards insurance, as many of you guys know, within the financial sector. Got a support level that's formed. Haven't done anything yet, right? Haven't done anything, but if we can break through that resistance, would be at least a bullish signal. Tradable, maybe, maybe not, depending on how aggressive we want to be. We did see a nice little breakout over on INVH. We were looking at them last week at this time, took all week to break, but a break is finally a break. Little bit of a doji on the other side of the insurance, on Progressive here. Big drop to the downside, little bit of a rally up, really unimpressive doji candle here today. So certainly a little bit of a bearish retracement potentially developing there. A little bit of a triangle developing here on Visa. Hasn't done anything just yet. Probably needs to break the swing to give us a clear signal, but breaking above this trend line would be a little bit of a bullish signal as well, as long as we're holding that trend line. We looked at EW. We looked at, no, we didn't look at GH here, kind of spending most of the week just kind of dancing around here in the between the rising 9 or the rising 9 and the rising 20. And Em, I'll answer your question in just a second. Absolutely, yes. The short answer is yes. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. A little bit of upward movement here. Thought a really interesting bullish retracement candidate over in BLDR in the industrial sector, consumer supplies. We looked at let's see if I can say that. AXBI, the home builders here firing kind of up here. Oh, this is the biotech one. That's interesting. Biotech holding at that support level. Thanks, Brendan. No, I did not look at them. That is an interesting bearish breakdown candidate, though. Nice fire back here today, but kind of testing some support. I've never traded the biotech ETF. I'm not sure how liquid or optionable it is, but hanging out by a support level. Yeah, this is why I like to hang out with you guys. Get me looking at other things that are kind of that maybe I would have missed. It looks like we've got a nice trend line working to the downside, have created that higher low, upward movement. So we're kind of in a little bit of a pinch type situation. Probably got to get a break either way. But yeah, that's interesting. Appreciate you bringing that one up, Brendan. That's an interesting one. So we do have BLDR, one of my favorite pullback candidates personally this week. RSG, Waste Management, both kind of knocking on the door of some resistance zones. Toll Brothers kind of hanging by a thread at some support at this point in time, getting those moving averages pushing down towards us as well. Let's see who else was interesting today. Seeing this pattern kind of develop where we pulled back, ran up, made a higher low, trying to get back some momentum. So probably a little bit further down the road, but I saw that in a lot of the trends that held up relatively well in the market. They've kind of developed that. We pulled back, buyers did come in, it created that lower high, and now we're working to try to get that higher low. Haven't done it yet though, by any means, at least as of right now. A little bit of a reversal type of candle, big, huge movement on Kroger here, pulling back, a little bit of a hammer yesterday, upward movement today, got a longer term downward trend, but certainly one of the characteristics of a reversal, right? More of aggressive type of reversal play, but certainly nice movement, the last week or so here as well. A nice little shallow pullback, dojing at that just above that 9 EMA on Roku as well. Yum, hanging around, a little bit of a 3-day ceiling at the 20-day moving average. Another interesting one. We've looked a lot at CERN, but I do think it's very worth keeping an eye on, whether we're betting on support or looking for a break. Got a pretty good history of support level there. Another nice day for Match, but still ways to go before we get into resistance. So certainly something nice there. AVLR looked a little bit better when I had a better candlestick earlier in the trading day, but we have seen some upward movement off of what I would presume. I didn't, looks like an earnings gap to the upside, so have to do a little more digging into that. Another pullback over in sale here, kind of after gapping down tremendously, starting to work its way back into some upward movement, still ways away from their highs. Our old friend Shop, nice little pullback developing here on Shop. Of course, broke out not too terribly long ago, pulled back, a little upward movement here today. So certainly an interesting character as well. And those are kind of the interesting names that I caught here today. I'm sure there are more out there. I'm sure some of the other coaches found some ones I'm looking forward to. I'm sure you guys are as well. To your question, Emily, yeah, so basically, my thought process with building the trade is you set the trade up, you've got her set up, you build it out, whatever that, what option trade, stock trade, whatever it might be, build it out. And then you don't know if you're going to get into it, and so you've got it built out. If you don't get into it, whatever, right? I might be building it out in the Theta Research Journal as I'm prepping it, but I'm not necessarily, journaling the trade. I want to, I kind of journal when you get in is kind of the philosophy that I have. And so you can probably tell by kind of the things I watch a lot of times, if this happens, I'd be interested, and it never does, right? So if I was always journaling off of things that I would do if certain things happened, I do a lot more journaling. So I'll wait till I get into the trade. When I'm breaking the trade down, I'll go through the whole 9 yards at first. So if we kind of, we'll see here. Let me zoom this in here so we can kind of build this out. And I don't know that our risk reward will be here if we don't scrunch intraday, but just as an easy example here, step system style. I think, not a very deep pullback, right? But if we take out today's high on Monday, that'd be kind of confirmation off of this candlestick. Want to get my stop loss, below here. I'm not going to be too specific mathematically on this end. My biggest problem is I'm not going to be able to target realistically to that swing high and get that 1-to-1 ratio, which I would really, really like to be able to do. I don't know, pretty darn close at 0.93 here. So pretty close. So I'll build everything out, right, Emily? So that goes, in my opinion, into the preparation of the trade. Now everything's built out. I've got my entry here, I've got my stop there. If I'm selling a credit spread against it, I've went through that process as well. So everything's in the up and up. So when I get hypothetically triggered into that trade on Monday morning, all the prep work's done. Then it pretty much go over to the trade journal and say, dear journal, I got in. So, here's the price I filled. Here's the date, obviously. But really, that's kind of the approach I take to journaling, Emily. I think everybody has to journal because every trade we make is data if we do, right? If we don't, then every trade is just a pullback that worked out or a breakout that didn't, right? And if we have, if our trades are, if our trades are more than just themselves, they become data points for us that we can really do some targeted changes to. At least that's my personal philosophy. So hopefully that gives you some ideas, but that's kind of, my process. Fire it up, go see if I got into anything new. If so, go get it journaled. If not, move on, right? And that's kind of the process that I take. And real quick here, Brendan bringing up Ball Corp. There was another one. Now that's a nice move, man. Ball Corp, Brendan, this has been one of those that sometimes we will, in our scanning report meetings, we'll laugh and we'll say, you don't bet against Ball because it doesn't matter. Such an impressive trend. Goodness gracious, it doesn't matter what the market's doing because Ball Corp does not care by any means. Very impressive chart, no doubt about that. So thank you for sharing that. So ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for the recap for today and for this week. But hey, you got it, Emily. So can't be anything else for better or worse. As always, guys, it is certainly my pleasure. I do appreciate everybody's time. No crazy times in the market. So we'll just continue to work through it. All right. We can love the volatility. We can hate the volatility, but we do have to accept it and work with the volatility one way or the other. We'll, of course, get those scouting reports to you here tomorrow. Hopefully some very interesting things for you to take a closer look at going into next week. Of course, if you are new around here, we always encourage you to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, join us on our different social medias, head over to Instagram. You still got a chance to vote. Still got a chance to vote over there for the stock you want us to go over. Join us over on Tackle Trading. Of course, on Twitter, you can find me at FrankMartin23. Always appreciate you guys. It's always a lot of fun going through this process with you. So my pleasure as always, guys. Thank you so much for your time. You guys have a great weekend. Be ready for another it'll keep us on our toes, right? So be ready for another interesting week in the market. Check the futures before the Monday open. You don't need me to tell you that, but do kind of pop in Sunday night or Monday before the open, see if what crazy stuff may have happened while we were hanging out enjoying the weekend. And I'll see you all same time and place here next week. So get out of here, guys. Have a great weekend. See you on Monday. Bye, everybody.